Hello and welcome to today's SCDN Policy Connection, Moving the Region, Exploring an Equitable Transit Future. My name is John Ukenya, Senior Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at Sustainable Pittsburgh. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and these materials will be shared after today's program. Please submit any questions via the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end. Also, feel free to enter your name and your organization into the chat so everyone knows who's in attendance. As always, we strive to create a welcoming environment for all participants and encourage everyone to engage with respect and courtesy. Constructive discussions and diverse perspectives are valued, and we ask that all interactions remain professional and considerate. By participating in this webinar, you are helping to foster a positive experience where everyone can learn and contribute meaningfully. At Sustainable Pittsburgh, our mission is to empower decision-making that builds a fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and prosperous region. We are doing that through connecting our stakeholders and networks we host, such as the Sustainable Community Development Network, SCDN, to share knowledge of sustainability through resources and experiences to help make a region where all people may succeed. Sustainable Pittsburgh is committed to building the knowledge, perspective, and ability needed to create a better tomorrow for our region. We're optimistic, having worked with nearly 1,000 businesses, communities, and organizations to take action using our customized frameworks to track progress and simultaneously advance social equity, environmental stewardship, and prosperity. The strategic networks we host leverage the collective expertise and diverse perspectives within our region to ensure our communities can meet our challenges today and thrive into the future. That is why we've invited you all today to attend as part of our Sustainable Community Development Network to learn together so we can act together. And together is how we co-create a fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and prosperous region. We would like to thank our silver sponsor, Pitt, Ohio, for their support of Sustainable Pittsburgh to make programs like this possible. And we'd also like to extend our gratitude to our bronze sponsors for their ongoing support. For our agenda today, we're going to start with a quick overview of Sustainable Pittsburgh's recognition programs. These are frameworks for municipalities, businesses, and other organizations to track and measure sustainability progress. We'll get an introduction to today's topic. Then we will hear from Ryan Worsing from Pittsburgh Regional Transit, who will set the stage for the most pressing public transportation issues facing our region and offer ways we can advocate for its expansion. Second, we'll hear from Kathy Tully of Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, SPC, who will speak to the landscape of public transportation across the 10-county region. Third, we'll hear from Jaspal Singh of the International Association of Public Transport, UITP, who will provide comparative analysis of case studies from across the country and the globe of what properly funded public transportation looks like and the benefits it can bring to a given region. Lastly, we'll come back around for a Q&A session with all our speakers. As a reminder, please use the Q&A box for any questions you may have. I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Sawyer Seilinger, who will talk us through Sustainable Pennsylvania.
Oops. To kick things off, I'll start by sharing a bit about Sustainable Pittsburgh's recognition programs. We have 4 programs, 3 for businesses in Southwestern Pennsylvania 10-county region, Sustainable Pittsburgh Shop, tailored for small retail businesses, Sustainable Pittsburgh Restaurant, suited for food businesses, Sustainable Pittsburgh Workplace, a catch-all for those that are not restaurants or shops. In addition to those 3 business programs, we have Sustainable Pennsylvania, a program created for municipalities across the state. More generally, each of these programs offers a step-by-step process to track and measure sustainability progress, as well as a framework that organizations can use to drive measurable impact while providing recognition for their sustainability achievements. Programs are based on best practices that have been peer-reviewed by knowledge experts. Programs are fluid and changing based on changes in needs, opportunity, landscape, and opportunities for impacts. Recognition comes in the form of bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level of designation or certification that is based on overall sustainability performance and determined by completing an online assessment through the unique portal offered by Sustainable Pittsburgh. To date, participation includes over 400 businesses, organizations, and municipalities, with dozens more working through the process. As many of you here are representative of the municipal audience, I'll share a bit more about Sustainable Pennsylvania Certification Program. Managed by Sustainable Pittsburgh in partnership with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, the program provides strategies, resources, and recognition to municipalities for improving quality of life and expanding opportunities for everyone. It covers a comprehensive set of sustainability topics that provide step-by-step guidance for how your community can advance its performance in areas such as waste and materials management, economic development and revitalization, parks and land conservation, as well as several other topics that can help build a more vibrant and resilient community. Spanning across the state, we currently have 139 municipalities that have earned Sustainable Pennsylvania certification, touching over 4 million Pennsylvanian residents. The Sustainable Pennsylvania program offers several benefits. First and foremost, it can help you baseline your community's current sustainability performance, as well as serve as an action plan for advancing your efforts. To help you advance your progress, the program offers resources, tools, and best practices developed by over 60 advisors. Getting certified helps your community be recognized as a leader in sustainability. And once certified, you will receive a promotional kit, which includes a badge for your website, job postings, and other uses, as well as a press release template for your community to utilize. We'll also share your achievements through the Sustainable Pittsburgh's communication channels. The Sustainable Pennsylvania website also provides your municipality with a municipal profile for you to use to help inform your residents about the actions that you've taken as a municipality to further your sustainability journey. And lastly, Sustainable PA's certification also is recognized on the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development's municipal funding applications, which can help a funding application stand out through clear demonstration of sustainability commitments and increase the chances of approval. There are just 4 steps for getting certified. First, you need to create an account. Right now, if you're a part of a municipality that's not signed up, take your phone out, scan the QR code, and follow the steps to start and create an account. You're going to click sign up and fill out that form to start and create your user login. Once you have created an account, the next step is to answer all the questions in the program. The program takes the form of an online assessment, and the questions are customized for municipalities. You can work with a team of colleagues to complete this, which would be a great way to help organize a sustainability team at your municipality, which is actually one of the actions. Third, after you complete your assessment, submit it. Our staff will provide feedback on your responses that will give you a chance to address before submitting your final answers. Last, you'll earn bronze, silver, gold, or platinum certification based on 2 criteria: the total percentage of possible points you've earned and whether you've completed the actions required for each level. There's no deadline to participate. Certifications expire every 3 years. And now I'll pass it back to my colleague, John.
Thank you, Sawyer. We're excited to have you all join us for today's discussion, Moving the Region, Exploring an Equitable Transit Future. So why are we focusing on this now? At Sustainable Pittsburgh, we recognize that reliable, accessible public transportation is essential for building sustainable, resilient communities. As our region faces the very real threat of deep cuts to Pittsburgh Regional Transit, PRT, now is a pivotal moment to elevate the conversation around equitable transit funding. Transit clearly intersects with environmental justice, economic vitality, and social equity. With thousands of K-12 students, workers, older adults, and individuals with disabilities depending on PRT every day, any reduction in service means a step backward for community access and inclusion. Public transportation plays a crucial role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, easing road congestion, and supporting local economies. The stakes are especially high as Pittsburgh prepares to host major national events in 2026, which will require a fully functioning, well-funded transit system. This discussion comes at a time when federal and state funding landscapes are shifting, and our region must be strategic about securing resources and advocating for policy that reflects the values of sustainability and equity. Today's session will explore how a commitment to funding public transit is a commitment to a cleaner, more connected, and economically vibrant Pittsburgh. Without further ado, let's explore how we can ensure our transit future moves everyone forward. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ryan. Next slide, please. Ryan is the Director of Sustainability at Pittsburgh Regional Transit, PRT, where he coordinates the adoption of clean fuels, renewable electricity, and energy efficiency. He has a decade of sustainability and community development experience, including at RMI, formerly the Rocky Mountain Institute, where he helped cities across the country implement brownfield solar and other sustainable strategies. He is a graduate of the College of William and Mary and Princeton University School of Public and International Affairs, SPIA. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Sawyer. I'm happy to be here today. I wish it was under different circumstances, but we do have an emergency on our hands, and we super appreciate all that Sustainable Pittsburgh has done to elevate the issue. And I thought I'd just get into it a little bit more today and talk about the sustainable benefits of transportation generally. So for those that are outside the region or are in the region and are otherwise unacquainted with PRT, we are a pretty sizable network. We operate 674 buses at last count, which is more than cities like Atlanta. We have 80 light rail vehicles. That'd be the T for those that use it going between the North Shore and the South Hills. And we also operate the Monongahela and Duquesne inclines. So we have a variety of different vehicles in service and a whole lot of infrastructure that's required to run it. So that's 4 bus garages, one technically 5, but one isn't in operation right now. We have 26 miles of light rail. All of that needs to be maintained every year. 54 different park and rides, and then 18 miles of dedicated busways. So those would be the East Busway, pictured here, the West Busway, and the South Busway. So all of that falls under our roof. Next slide, please. In terms of ridership, we carry 37 million riders in the region in a given year. 2024, that was our number. That is the equivalent of 39,000 cars every weekday. That is a lot of people moving from A to B. And that isn't even our peak. Our peak was, well, as we'll get into, we've kind of chopped down our service year over year, but before the pandemic, we were quite a bit higher. And as you can see from these charts here, we're still struggling to recover from the COVID pandemic. And that has kind of been a factor in the funding situation that we now find ourselves in. So it's sort of a death spiral where we get our funding based on our ridership, and when our ridership decreases because of something exogenous like COVID, we get less funding, we then provide worse service, we then lose more ridership, and so on until, it basically tracks to zero. We hope we don't get there though, although the current crisis we're in, just to put some numbers to that, if we don't get funding that we're requesting from the state of Pennsylvania, then come the turn of the month in July, we'll be facing a $100 million deficit. And as a result, we would have to cut really dramatically our service. It would be something on the order of 35% of our service. We would have to raise our fees, our fares by 9%. And this is on top of decades of cuts that we've already been forced to make as a result of that spiral that I just described. So it's truly a crisis. And that's why we're trying to get the word out about this so that we can at least return to where we were before the pandemic and then hopefully grow beyond. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our climate impact, and it starts with what we put out into the atmosphere, which is roughly 100,000 metric tons of Scope 1 and 2 emissions every single year. So for those that don't know what that means, that's basically direct emissions from our buses and from our buildings, as well as the electricity that we use for our buses, our buses, the T, and the buildings as well. And I've highlighted here in this slide that most of those emissions do come from buses, something like 70%. But it does span all kinds of different things, all the way from buses to refrigerants to the buildings like I described. Next slide, please. And buses on a per mile basis are a little bit dirtier than cars, as you can see in this graph here. The diesel buses and renewable diesel buses, which is a kind of cleaner alternative that we're exploring right now. On a per mile basis, they do emit a lot of breathable pollution, separate and apart from the carbon dioxide that's put out into the air that's causing climate change. And the electric buses off to the far right, and you could also say the same for hydrogen powered buses or any kind of zero emission bus, it really does track down to zero. So I bring this up to say we are trying to take our operations and make them as clean as possible. We have 23 electric buses running in service right now that don't pollute anything into the local atmosphere. And we've got ambitions to go fully net zero by 2045. And that would involve a lot more zero emission buses, as well as the T, which is already running on electricity. So next slide, please. But we are still a huge emissions and pollutions saver, as is any transit agency. And the main reason for that is pretty simple. It's that one bus, even though it's slightly more polluting on a per mile basis, takes 40 vehicles off the street. That's the capacity of one of our standard buses, and we have even the big bendy buses that will carry more than that. So one bus equals 40 personal vehicles on the street. Next slide. And then one rail car takes 62 vehicles off the street. Keep in mind, T often is two rail cars together. So we're removing a lot of cars from the street, and that really is the name of the game. Anytime someone is forced to drive in a car, they are forced to emit at the maximum. We want to be able to make our transportation more efficient, get people from where they are to where they need to go in the most space efficient and energy efficient way possible. Next slide. So you add it all up, and this is just looking at the breathable pollution in the local air. This isn't global warming, carbon dioxide type stuff. This isn't greenhouse gases. This is just the stuff that we might breathe. And if you've looked outside your window today and yesterday, you can see that the air quality is very important. We have a lot of wildfire smoke in the air right now, and that stuff's visible, but there's also a lot of invisible stuff that transportation produces that adds to all of that. So we see it as our job to remove as much of that pollution as we possibly can. And on an average year, as you can see in this chart here, if you tally up all of those kinds of pollution, we basically take a steel mill's worth of pollution out of the air. That is stuff like carbon monoxide, toxic stuff that nobody wants to be breathing in. And in our climate action plan, we say that if everyone in the county used transit, emissions from passenger travel would be cut in half. And I think that's kind of conservative. So there really isn't any way to achieve any of our climate goals, either at the state, local, or even the national level, such that they are, without having really robust public transportation. There's just no way. And that's also not counting the congestion impacts as well. So this is just what we do normally. But if you say took 35% of our service away, which is what's currently on the table, and all of those people moved to cars, you would have not just the added impact of that pollution, but you'd have a lot more congestion. So you'd have all these idling vehicles that are polluting above and beyond what they would normally pollute. And it's basically an exponential growth of emissions that we are really, really, really trying to avoid. Next slide, please. So all of this is at risk from the state funding cuts as I described, and I'll get into the specific risks in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So the proposed transit cuts, as I said, would force people into cars and undo health benefits to our community, and that would threaten all of our health and safety beyond, not just the people that ride our system. So this graphic here, you can see, practically speaking, what that would mean for people as well. This is that map that you're seeing is current conditions, and then it shifts over to a 35% funding cut scenario. And you can see all how much redder the map gets, and that's an increase in commute time to get to downtown. And that you can basically say are people that are going to be moving to their cars instead, and all of those people shifting to cars is going to just explode pollution locally in our area. Young lungs at play. If you've seen those signs at playgrounds around the community, young lungs do not want this. Next slide, please. And so actually our air has been trending cleaner despite what you see outside today. This is a rough graph from the county health department. And all the way through 2023. You can see it's generally getting better, but next slide. You can see we're still some of the worst air quality in the country. And a lot of that has to do with legacy pollution sources, but anything we add to the atmosphere that's already out there is on top of what is among the worst metropolitan pollution rankings in the country. So if we're trying to attract people to our region, which is, our broad economic goal, we can't be increasing our air pollution. We can't be adding to an already terrible reputation for air pollution that we have right now. We're trying to overcome that, and anything that we do to transit could really, help or hurt. Next slide. Also, more driving equals more crashes. There's definite safety impacts that are separate and apart from all of these air pollution impacts. So this is a snippet from a blog by Bike Pittsburgh. Last year, in 2024, there were 32%, or maybe I'll just read this, I'll say it in their own words. Overall crashes, which were usually well under 4,000 per year, were 32% below average in 2024, dropping below 3,000 crashes for the first time. More impressive is that in 2024, the life-altering crashes that resulted in injury saw a huge 41% drop since 2015. Those impacts are really hard won. A lot of the traffic calming and infrastructure upgrades that the city's put in place has resulted in these things, and we undo all of it and then some if we just add more cars to the street. The more cars on the street, the more opportunities there are for impact with pedestrians and cyclists, and that's something that we want to avoid as well. Next slide. Also, it maybe goes without saying is that more cars on the street equal more global warming, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which contribute to global warming, which then increases temperatures. This graphic to the right here shows the estimated increase over 30 years in days in Pittsburgh, over 80 degrees, over 90 degrees, and over 100 degrees. And so just to go to that far side, we're expected under the current trend to see 11 more days over 100 degrees in 30 years. So think how much, when it goes into the atmosphere, it's everyone's problem, whether we're here or whether we're in Nepal, but it is still something of a personal responsibility that we should feel to decrease our emissions so that this doesn't happen. Global warming has local consequences, and we're already projected to get hotter as a region. We have to be doing everything in our power to control that as best we can. Next slide. So everything rides on transit, and not just people. Next slide. So that's all I really wanted to say today. I have a few things that you can do if you'd like to help or if you feel alarmed by this. The biggest thing is that you can share your story. If you scan the QR code on this slide, it'll take you to a website that gives you more specific instructions. But broadly speaking, what we're looking for is you to call your state representatives. That's huge. If you haven't done it already, please do, especially if you have even business operations or anything else in other parts of the state whose representatives have maybe been on the fence or opposed to increasing transit funding. This is a state level issue. Pittsburgh's dealing with it, Philadelphia's dealing with it, and the ones who are honestly dealing with it the most because their service might get wiped out to near zero are a lot of the rural counties in Pennsylvania. So we're all in this together. We're advocating for some change that will benefit all of us. So please call those state representatives either locally or elsewhere in Pennsylvania. We also have an online survey that you can take on that website. There is a hotline you can call and leave your testimony. You can submit a video testimony. I'll leave my email in the chat and you can arrange that with me if that's something you're interested in. And then we also have an in-person public hearing a week from today, and that is our final public hearing. That'll be at the convention center downtown. So please, if you have an interest in this, show up, put your name and your testimony on record. We would very much appreciate it. And then one more specific thing, one last slide. We have something called the Partner Pass program that we're rolling out that is something that if you're a business, an employer, if you're a landlord of a multifamily property, or if you're a school that's not on PRT's University Pass program, this is for you. It's something that we're just rolling out, and basically what it is a massive discount on the monthly transit pass that a resident or an employee from those eligible entities. It's a massive discount on the transit pass for them. So if I'm a tenant of a building that enrolls, or I'm an employee of a company that enrolls, I can have a transit pass for $28 a month, which is a 70% discount over the normal rate. It's a big deal. It signs up a lot of people to transit all at once. And the timing for this is really opportune from our perspective, because we do need a lot more people signing up to say, yes, we support transit and we support it so much, we're going to commit to having everyone in our building, everyone in our company as a transit rider. So if this is something that appeals to you, if you are an eligible entity, please, I'll leave my email in the chat. We can arrange this as well. I'd love to talk to you. So that's all I have, and I look forward to everyone else's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Now I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Catherine. Catherine Tully, MPA, GISP, is the Manager of Environmental Programs at the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and Economic Development District, serving the 10-county region of Southwestern Pennsylvania. Kathy began her career in the telecommunications industry and later transitioned to civil engineering and environmental consulting before joining SPC as a data and mapping analyst in 2014. She currently manages SPC's Regional Water Resource Center and its EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Planning Grant activities for the Pittsburgh Metropolitan Statistical Area. Without further ado, welcome, Kathy.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and many, many thanks to Sustainable Pittsburgh for the great work that they do and for having me today. So yeah, just to give a quick SPC intro, we're your region's planning commission. We are a local development district under the Appalachian Regional Commission and an economic development district under the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And we also encompass the 8-county Pittsburgh Metropolitan Statistical Area. So we wear many hats. SPC helps our member counties and municipalities to access more than $35 billion in state and federal transportation and economic development funds allocated to the region through 2045. Next slide. So I wanted to spend some time up front initially to discuss how SPC, as the Regional Planning Commission, is directly involved on multiple fronts with regional transit planning. And I'll start with some brief information on funding and then discuss a little bit about how we think about transportation-related emissions as an MPO. So I'm showing some information on the slide here to explain a little bit about how transportation funding works in the US. It can be somewhat cryptic. It's not always simple. In the US, MPOs and RPOs, which are rural planning organizations, are responsible for programming this funding every 2 years into a 4-year planning framework for investments known as the TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program. And there is not an acronym in transportation planning we've ever met that we didn't like. The TIP is the apparatus by which the region's policies, goals, and priorities, as set forth in the region's long-range plan, become funded, implementable projects. So for those of you who are familiar with the idea of a municipal or a county comprehensive plan, SPC is federally required to produce a similar sort of plan for our region that will help to direct our investments over time. SPC's Smart Moves plan, adopted in June of 2023, is the region's official long-range plan authorized by the federal government that directly attaches real funding to real projects that will be advanced in Southwestern Pennsylvania. The TIP includes both capital and non-capital surface transportation projects, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and other transportation enhancements, highway projects and safety projects included in the state's strategic highway safety plan, as well as some operations funding. The TIP is required to be fiscally constrained, and it is developed in cooperation with state and public transit providers and other transportation officials. And on a side note, we are actually undergoing our triennial certification review with FTA this week. So that means that we need to recertify as an agency with FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, every 3 years in order to continue receiving and distributing FTA funds. So our transit planners were a little busy this week. And I do want to note that all of our long-range plan and TIP documents are published on our website. And if anyone has questions about specific TIP projects or funding in the 10 counties, I'll recommend that you connect with our transit planning manager, Devin White, and we'll be happy to follow up with you after today's session. Next slide. So on this slide, the image here shows a theoretical regional transit center with a number of forward-thinking features, including dedicated busways, adjacent to recreational trails and light rail, protected on-street bike lanes, traffic calming, green infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, and mixed-use transit-oriented development. It's a great example of our region's vision for our transportation network as set forth in the long-range plan, which calls for, and I quote, a world-class, safe, well-maintained, and connected multimodal transportation system that provides mobility for all, empowers resilient and sustainable communities, and supports a globally competitive economy. So what's the rationale behind this? Focus on sustainable and resilient communities is key. The stewardship and revitalization of our communities will make us attractive for new investment. Coordinated investments in connectivity, walkable neighborhoods, and green infrastructure serve as a catalyst to attract both businesses and residents to our communities. And the concept that I want you to take away from this is that while our region's transit has developed in specific ways over time, we are also as a region deliberately engaged around envisioning for what our transit system could be and how the region's priorities shape our vision, not just for our transit systems themselves, but by extension, our communities and our ways of living in and around those communities. Next slide. So continuing that idea of visioning, our current regional plan envisions an expansion of local and regional active transportation facilities, which should be considered whenever roads or bridges are rehabilitated or reconstructed. We also want to look at connecting regional trail networks to one another into local facilities, enabling safe, seamless travel by active transportation modes across the region. So our Smart Moves plan envisions collaboration among local governments and other stakeholders to implement complete streets policies in communities across the region, which ties safer human-scale street designs to transportation interfaces such as transit hubs. In October of 2024, the Commission formally adopted a regional complete streets policy that codifies the benefits of complete streets for communities, the economy, and the overall health and safety of our region's residents. Our long-range plan sets aside significant funds to implement projects that advance active transportation, link land use and transportation planning, and expands transit options while helping to revitalize communities and improve air quality. So let's see. Next slide. So our region's air quality has been a serious barrier to attracting new residents in the region, but we have a lot of great amenities in our region that are attractive to multiple age groups. In 2023, London Tree named Pittsburgh as one of the top 11 cities in the country for millennial home buyers and one of the top 11 best cities for young professionals. The millennial and Gen Z generations tend to have a preference for walkable, bikeable communities, but these types of communities incidentally have a benefit of also being aging friendly. In 2023, Pittsburgh was named one of the nation's top 10 places to retire by US News and World Report. So the Pittsburgh region, as we all know, has long had one of the highest senior populations in the country. And by focusing on these human scale infrastructure investments, especially giving residents the option to decrease the usage of personal vehicles, is one way to support transportation needs across multiple generations. And then for a quick glance at regional funding needs, not only do we need to continue to prioritize investment based on everyday performance criteria at the corridor level, we also need to consider the context of each community in order to create genuine livable places, emphasizing, again, those complete streets with a variety of mobility options. So this slide shows some numbers from our long-range plan. So this was our view from 2023, indicating the gaps between funding for highway and bridge repairs versus public transit, as well as our estimate of state versus regional capacity needs. And again, these numbers are over the 20-year lifetime of our plan. So looking 20 years out, we had an estimated capacity funding need of $5.2 billion through 2045. Current multimodal investments through our TIP focus on capital maintenance, new capacity, operations and efficiency, system preservation and modernization, travel demand management and safety, and include transit, intermodal facilities, for example, that could be rail to waterway, and active transportation investments such as pedestrian and bicycle facilities, both of which are often naturally transit adjacent. So that brings us to the news from this week. So next slide. So the funding context from June 3rd is that the governor released their budget proposal with a proposal for an additional $292 million in state budget funding increase for transit. So this is the first significant increase in state support for mass transit in more than a decade, benefiting transit systems in every county that serve nearly 1 million riders each day across rural, urban, and suburban communities across the Commonwealth. So this would be funded through a portion of the state sales and use tax. It's currently at 7.68%. It would go up to 9.43% and would be estimated to produce more than $330 million in revenue for transit through 2029 to 2030. And the additional money from the governor's budget proposal would be distributed to agencies through a legislatively established funding formula. And I should note that this is for operations, not capital projects. Next slide. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of the types of transit service that we have outside of Allegheny County. And I'll just touch on this slide very quickly. So we have a total of 13 transit authorities that exist within or have crossover service into our 10 counties. All but 9 of our 10 counties have a dedicated transit authority. Greene County does not have a dedicated transit authority, but it does have limited commuter service from Mountain Line Transit out of Morgantown, West Virginia. Our transit planning team provides a variety of technical services to the transit authorities in our region outside of our direct work with our transit operators committee. And transit planning in the region, it's truly a collaborative effort. We have good relationships with our neighboring MPOs, RPOs, and transit authorities. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about how our funding also touches on the region's air quality. MPOs are responsible for making transportation air quality conformity determinations for both our transportation improvement program and the long range plan. The air quality conformity determination is required under the Federal Clean Air Act, and SPC's conformity finding is based upon the criteria and procedures described in the EPA's transportation conformity rule at 40 CFR Part 93. Our conformity analysis is conducted by our modeling team, consistent with procedures outlined in the EPA-approved Pennsylvania State Implementation Plan, and satisfies all the applicable conformity process requirements that EPA requires of us for designated non-attainment and maintenance areas under federal air quality standards. So those are the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, which is fun to say, for ozone, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide. SPC uses EPA's MOVES model, the Motor Vehicle Emissions Simulator, along with our travel model to simulate emissions projections for the region. Excuse me. So our conformity determination is based on our most recent emissions estimates, and those are in turn based on recent population, employment, travel, and congestion estimates as determined by us as the MPO. So the key thing to take away from this is that we are required to basically determine that any transportation project that we fund as an MPO either A, contributes to a reduction in emissions in non-attainment areas, and also that our transportation plans or programs, so what we're being funded, do not increase the frequency or severity of existing violations in the applicable air quality attainment zones. So on the next few slides, I'll show some maps of our various air quality non-attainment and maintenance areas in the region. And again, just a reminder that our air quality conformity report for the long range plan and the TIP are available on our website. Next slide. So I'm going to just kind of go through these really quick and give everyone a quick chemistry flashback to high school or college. So there are 2 types of air pollution. Found a nice graphic from EPA that kind of helps you visualize the size of these. PM10 has a diameter of 10 micrometers or less, and it's a respiratory irritant. PM 2.5 is much smaller and represents a pulmonary and cardiovascular risk, especially for vulnerable populations. These 2 types of particulate matter come from the combustion of carbon-based fuels, industrial processes, and other sources. And Ryan touched on our regional air quality earlier. If you want to monitor what the current conditions are, you can check out airnow.gov, and you can see this week, in addition to the wildfire smoke that we're dealing with, we're also at a moderate stage for PM 2.5 and ozone. And this is a trend that you'll see pretty much stay standard through the rest of the summer. Next slide. So ozone is a gas molecule composed of 3 oxygen atoms. It's good high up in the atmosphere because it helps protect us from ultraviolet radiation from the sun. But when it's down low at the ground, it makes it difficult to breathe and causes other health problems. It's formed by chemical reaction between NOx and VOx, which are nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. And it tends to reach unhealthy levels on hot, sunny days. And that's when you'll see, kind of a brownish smog developing the city. So smog is a fog or haze combined with smoke and other atmospheric pollutants. And again, you can also track the current levels of that on airnow.gov. Next slide. So I couldn't find an exciting picture of carbon monoxide. So here's a good reminder to check your batteries in your home or office's CO monitor. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas. It's harmful in high concentrations because it interferes with the body's ability to carry oxygen in the bloodstream. And it's formed from the incomplete combustion of carbon-based fuels such as gasoline, coal, natural gas, and so forth, and comes from vehicle exhaust. Next slide. So We have, I won't kind of belabor all this detail, but we have 7 EPA designated non-attainment or maintenance areas in the 10-county region. And, I hope you enjoyed this very government issue map on this slide, in the next slide. And, looking at this map, I want to say that I'm personally glad that we have transit service in every county that's non-attainment. Next slide. So for PM 2.5, 10, and carbon monoxide, we do have non-attainment or maintenance areas in the region. The downtown area of Pittsburgh is really our only area that's considered maintenance for carbon monoxide, but we have been meeting those maintenance requirements for many years now, and EPA is satisfied with where we're at with that. The kind of leaf-colored green shape on the screen in Allegheny County represents the area around the Clairton Coat Works, and then the map on the right-hand side of the screen, which I realize, the legend's difficult to see, is just showing the different non-attainment and maintenance areas based on the different years of the air quality, requirements for those particular pollutants. And again, there's more information on all of this in our air quality conformity report that's posted on our website. Next slide. So to kind of bring this home, I wanted to visualize this in a geographic context, and definitely wanted to give a shout out to the Breathe Project for their mapping of concentrations of particulate matter, at least within Allegheny County. So, as we all know, our roads in this region tend to follow waterways and are often located in valleys which concentrate air pollution. And, referring back to Ryan's previous slide, what do we think an extra 39,000 vehicles a day on the roads will do to the region's air quality as you're looking at this map? Next slide. So I also wanted to give a shout out to Sustainable Pittsburgh. This slide in particular was taken from one of our climate pollution reduction plan meetings. And this data comes from the well-known Justice 40 data set for the nation via the former CJUST tool. This grant required us to examine environmental justice and economic burdens as part of the priorities of the previous federal administration. And, you can see for most of our counties here, the main barriers that we're dealing with in terms of environmental and economic justice are energy costs, asthma, and transportation barriers. And luckily, transit is a very great solution to 2 of those issues we see on this slide. And I did want to give a shout out to FTA for their, in terms of transit funding, what's a potential solution that we have available to solve some of these issues. FTA has been running the low no emission bus program for many years, and maybe Ryan can speak to that during the Q&A. Just last month, FTA announced an opportunity to apply for $1.5 billion nationally in competitive grants for fiscal year 25 for the low or no emission bus program. Next slide. And then just to wrap this up, I have some quick stats here that I pulled from our priority climate action plan. So regionally, all of our GHG emissions, transportation included, represent 22% of the state's total emissions. Within Allegheny County, we have 48% of the region's population, and the county contributes 40% of the region's emissions. We have multiple what are considered Justice 40 tracks in the region. And, it's something that we need to focus on in order to continue to improve our region's health and air quality. So this basically gives you a picture of our long-term efforts to manage transportation and other sources of emissions in the region as we continue to work toward a more resilient and healthy future. I will note again that this data reflects the priorities of the prior federal administration, and that SBC is doing this work under an existing executed planning grant through EPA. And lastly, again, just to kind of get you an intro into all of this data, all of our public documents, including the long-range plan, TIP, air quality conformity report, and our priority climate action plan are available on our website, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Catherine. Last but not least, we're proud to welcome Jaspal. Jaspal Singh is the Senior Director of Membership and Global Operations at the International Association of Public Transport, UITP, and leads the UITP North America office. With more than 16 years of experience in mobility, innovation, and technology, he has worked across public agencies, startups, and global firms. He is also a principal at Valorizer Consultants and host of the Mobility Innovators podcast. Jaspal holds graduate degrees in business and innovation from Queen's University and actively advises startups in mobility and logistics. Without further ado, Welcome, Jasper.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for your kind intro. And thank you, Sustainable Pittsburgh, to extend the invitation and giving this opportunity to share some of our knowledge from UITP, which is an International Association of Public Transport. Our headquarters is based in Brussels, but we have more than 15 offices around the world, including an office in US, and work with members all around the world. So let's kick start. I'll go to the next slide. So, I think my job is much easier after a great presentation by Ryan and Catherine talking about benefit of public transportation and highlighting how it helped to reduce the number of car on the road, 39,000 vehicles. You can't imagine how much traffic, pollution, and safety issue it can create. And I think it's very important to understand that mobility is important, and both in the OECD country, including US and North America, where I live in Canada, but also in a country which are not developed. But in the OECD country, the share of car users is very high. 62% of our passenger kilometer are driven by car user. And I think it's very important to understand if we are really to create a more sustainable and inclusive society, we need to reduce the share. And what Catherine mentioned, it's also very important. The young people prefer to live in a space which is more open, more walkable, and they can have more space for themselves. So when we talk about, next slide, when we talk about public transportation in UITP, I think it's always very important to highlight that the mass transport, the bus, train, are the backbone of a public transport system. And no city can be built without having a good bus and a train network city. You cannot tell me any city in the world which is, as a tourist you visit, or as a visitor you see, or as a person you live, a good city is without a good public transportation system. So the mass public transport is important, and the funding of mass public transport is important. And now there are new modes are emerging. And in UITP, when we talk about public transportation, we talk about all kind of mode. We need to think about micromobility. We need to think about ride hailing. We need to think about carpooling and car service. Autonomous vehicle, it's emerging mobility tool. So we need to think about how we can redefine public transport and not just narrow down, but at the same time, we need to remember what is the backbone for any good city to build a public transportation. Next slide. And in UITP, we actually publish a report which is called the Public Transport Benefit, and it's available on UITP website. But one thing I want to share is that's what the purpose of this webinar is, that we need to speak out for our rights, and that's what we did in last year during the EU election. UITP ran this campaign on I Vote Public Transportation. We collected more than 1.6 million votes from people who actually reach out to their senator and reach out to their policymaker and talk about that they want to vote for public transport. So it's very important as a citizen voice that we come forward and talk about that why the public transport investment is important. And I'll share some global perspective. It's not about just a clean air quality. I would say investment in public transport is not only sustainable, but it's profitable. So we need to think about also the economic value created through public transportation. If you go to the next slide, this is how our city look like right now. If you see the number of cars, the bus stuck in the traffic, and the number of people transported by the car, I don't know if we really want our cities always to look like this, or we want to make it more accessible. So we need to really think about how to redefine. And this is a joke we tell also to the car user. In fact, it's good if there is a more investment in public transport, then there can be better space even for car user. They will say they don't need to drive that much every time, and they can use public transport whenever it's required. So we are not saying don't buy your car, but park at home and use transit whenever it's possible. You can reach faster, you can reach safer, and you can also contribute to the society. So I want to share some of the highlight from our PT benefit. So if you go to the next slide, and we'll talk about how public transport can help to elevate congestion. So when Ryan mentioned about 39,000 car to take away from the street by the PRT. So if you really want to transport number of people in the equal space in the 3.5 meter lane, the only, I would say, sustainable solution is having a bus, PRT, light rail, or a suburban rail. I mean, with the same length, a narrow length, you can transport how many number of people within an hour. So it's important to remember it's actually helped to reduce the congestion on the road. So more investment in public transportation is good for public transport user, but it's also good for overall for the society. The ambulance can get more space. The emergency vehicle can transport faster. The police and the security personnel can reach faster to the place they want to reach. So investment in public transportation not only help to create more faster access for the user who cannot who don't want to travel by car, but also create space for others, important users. Next slide. One of the important benefit of public transportation, we are facing this health challenge in our society. I see my kids, more and more we are not going out, we are not walking, we are not traveling. How can we do that? So, when we did study at UITP, and that's what we realized that if you use a public transportation, you actually do 30% more steps. And it's funny when people want to walk more on treadmill rather than walk in the street and out, because it's also good for mental health. And that's what a lot of cities are discovering now. Using public transportation, you not only address the healthcare issues, you can actually reduce the healthcare cost for the city, but you also push people to have more physical activity, create more better the air and noise quality can be improved. And also, when people see each other around, the mental health issue can be resolved. It's a fun coincidence, but the CEO of Omata, Randy, he met his wife during the games on public transit. So you can meet some interesting people. So that's what we see. It make people healthier, not by just creating a better air quality and all, but forcing people to walk a little bit more and exercise more, which in our daily day-to-day work life, we are getting less and less time for outdoor activities or physical activity. So it actually forced people to do that in a way, and that's what we see in a country where the high uses of public transport, the obesity level is lower. I mean, there are other causes as well, but it's not, I would say, the only thing, but it really helped to make physical movement better. So the investment in public transport will actually help to reduce the healthcare cost. And there are some study which highlighted that. Next slide. And then it bring everyone near everywhere. This is one of the point the earlier presenter also presented about. This is a data from four cities, so Munich and Singapore, which has a very good quality of public transportation system, comparing with Houston and Melbourne. And you can see the job access actually increase by having a better public transport system, and you can create better economic value for people to move around. So the same level of job in Singapore and in Munich can be accessed in 20 to 25 minutes, whereas in Munich and Singapore, it's you can actually reach much far places to access the job. So creating better public transport, you actually create economic value. You give more guarantee to everybody they can access to job, and I think that's very important. That when we say that we want to create a more equitable society where we want to create better economic opportunity for people who are at the lower strata or at the medium strata and want to grow. So that's a way. So you can reach faster, you can save money and use those economic value for other activity. Next slide. It actually improves safety, and I think Rand covered a little bit about this. But if you see this chart, which actually talk about the annual per capita passenger mile and the accident rate, on the right side, you see all the blue dot, which is Northern Europe, and we all know that the public transportation system in Northern Europe is nice and better compared to when we compare with US, Canada, and Australia, and they are more on the left side. So having a better public transportation system also improve the road safety, both for the car user as well as for the pedestrian. The traffic fatality is low, and there are a lot of estimate which put the economic value to these fatality and accident, which are turned into billions of dollars. So again, I would say a lot of people, when they talk about public transport, it's actually creating a lot of indirect economic value for the society. And also imagine the kind of harm. I live in Toronto, and we have this 401 highway. And every day we hear about sad fatal accident on this 401. I don't hear those kind of news, luckily, in the transit system. So if I compare the fatality caused by the highways and road network, I'm not saying the highways are not important, but if we can save the precious human life, it creates a lot of economic value. And it's a data which prove clearly. It's not a magic. It's not something which is we cannot understand. By just putting data together, we can understand the number of road fatality also go down drastically if we invest more in public transport and there is better coverage of public transportation. Next slide. It can also be a big tool for creating jobs. And the good thing is the public transport jobs are very local jobs. It's not the job which can be move away. In fact, in EU, there are 2 million jobs in public transportation sector. So they created by the mobility sector. And overall, that's an estimate the UITP put together. The numbers are pretty little bit older. We did this estimation somewhere in 2014 and 15. There are 15 million people who are working in the transit area. And in fact, these are more number of people working in public transportation compared to any other transportation industry, either you compare with air and all. So it shows that it's a big employer. It can create local job. In many city, like I highlighted on my slide, the public transportation, the PT operator are the largest employer in Amsterdam, in Barcelona, in Brussels, in Geneva, in Dublin. And some of these cities, they are within the top 5 employers. So it again bringing back economic value. Every dollar whatever we are investing is bringing back to the economy of the local city. Next slide. And this is the core message I want to highlight. It's an investment. This is a data which is published by APTA, American Public Transport Association. We work very closely with them, that even $1 invested in public transportation, you get the $5 economic value. So there is no brainer in terms of return on investment. If any politician, any policymaker are looking for return on investment, this is the best investment where you can get 5 times of your original investment. Next slide. And then, it's very important to use public transport to move our city. And we all heard about the ERA tour last year, where the people, the fans were going to different places. US will be hosting couple of biggest event. The FIFA is coming to US next year. Then we have 250 year of foundation celebration. Then we will have Olympics coming to the US. So these are the big event coming. How will we transport those people? And there are some data which prove that the only better way to do is by using public transportation. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to share this interesting data. If you press a couple of times, you will see more. Like there was, go back one slide quickly. There is, with the public transportation, only 4 city. So there was a vehicle hour delay calculated by Street Light from Jacob, and they found that only 4 city were doing better. And again, I would say there is no secret sauce. All these 4 cities had a good connectivity between public transportation and the stadium, and Pittsburgh is one of them. That their delay is less than 100, and New Jersey Transit was at the top because their stadium is just next to the light rail station. So it's important to highlight that how by investing in public transportation you can do these mega event. I go a little faster. I know I'm short of time. So if you go to the next slide, this is a slide, and we will share all these slides. I just want to share in UITP we do this global economic outlook survey. And in this survey, we actually ask different agencies from around the world what is the future they see, what kind of investment they are seeing in sustainable urban mobility. And you can see more or less in short to medium term, the things look pretty okay, that the investment will continue to grow, although we see some slowdown in the long-term basis. Next slide. And also, I think we need to rethink about what are the options to raise money for public transportation. So, of course, subsidies and grants from the public government will be important, but many cities are now looking the social bond, the carbon credit, and public debt to fund these public transportation. So, I'll share this slide later. And then I'll just have a last slide and just briefly about what UITP is. So, we are a 140-year-old organization. Next slide. And having 1,900 members in 100 countries around the world and trying to promote public transportation. And we can go to the last slide about the summit. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I'll share these. Next slide. And then this is how we share knowledge. We have these regional committees and platform where we share knowledge. And last slide is about UITP will be hosting a summit. Next slide. Next month, this month, next week, sorry, it's look like next week we'll have hosting our UITP summit in Hamburg, and we will be talking about public transportation. So thank you so much. I know I went a little bit over the time, but back to you, right, John.
Thank you, Jasper. I think you hit the nail on the head. You definitely were not over time at all. We're right on time. So yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Ryan and Kathy. Panelists, if you don't mind turning your cameras back on and join me on screen, and we'll begin our Q&A portion of today's webinar. Once again, if you have a question, please feel free to add it to the Q&A box in the chat. I saw a couple questions come in, but I think for the sake of everyone who's watching or listening but cannot look at the chat, if you don't mind, I'm going to read some of the questions and maybe you can repeat your answers in brief or to whatever level of detail you wish. So the first question was, why is there no bus system to the northern regions of Pittsburgh? It's kind of a two-parter. How does access to public transit improve issues of diversity in outlying communities? How can this be facilitated better?
I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, Kathy, you take it because you did provide the answer.
Yeah, well, so I wanted to tag you in to talk about the transit service prior to 2012, if we could talk about that briefly. But yeah, we've been working with, some of the transit providers such as PRT, Beaver County Transit and Butler County Transit on expanding their services north. Both of those transit providers do have commuter service, but there isn't as much service to the northern suburbs. And so funding for these expansions does continue to be a struggle. And some of the planning that we're doing, we're looking at 10 years out. We regularly hear from residents in our rural counties that they do want to see more transit availability, but again, a lot of it's dependent on funding. So I'll tag over to Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, prior to COVID, we had much better service up into just to use the north as an example. You could pick your direction, and the answer is still probably true. We went all the way up, I believe, to the border with Cranberry. So I mean, it was more a better quality service back then that we've unfortunately had to chip into. Act 89, which is the current funding that we're operating on, or were up until COVID, really cut into our ability to provide service to those areas pretty substantially. We would obviously like to restore service to all of these places. And as someone who grew up in the North Hills and currently lives in the North Side, I can say that I have a personal interest in seeing that service restored. But it is tough. And in an environment like we're in right now, where you've got to kill your darlings really when you're looking at all these these bus routes. Unfortunately, a lot of the routes leading to those far-flung northern places are commuter centric, where they'll bring a lot of people in during the workday, but then all those buses basically have to go back to their starting point with no people on them. And that's where, even though it functions well as a commuter service, it just isn't as sustainable on a financial basis as other routes. Ideally, you'd want to have it, but in an emergency like we're in right now, you sometimes have to make those difficult calls.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. The next question is, why is state funding essential as opposed to raising fees to cover services? Why should state funding be necessary when most of it is designated for large cities and not residents in more rural areas? In addition to the decrease in emissions benefit, how is affordable public transit essential for people in our community? And the person also wanted to note that they are asking this question because others might ask it because they are supportive.
So I can chime in here as well, but I'll maybe throw it to the other panelists for just the broader kind of, social impact of having transit. At least in our area, the state is really the biggest contributor. It's really our only option for funding. And even if we were to look to local options of funding, for example, let's just say there was like a hypothetical thing at the county level, oftentimes the state preempts the county from doing that. So no matter which direction you want to take, the state is kind of the gatekeeper. As I said in my answer to this, in this question asker, our fare box revenue is about 12%, and that's about normal. Anything above approaching 20 or above is considered very good. And so no matter how you slice it, you're not going to pay your way with the fare box revenue. That's why it's a public service rather than a private service. It's got to be subsidized somewhere, somehow. The federal government contributes a fair amount, but it's mostly on capital projects, so construction of new things and physical infrastructure maintenance. So it really is the state, and it was always set up to be the state. It is unfortunate that the way it works out through the state is that we get it in these chunks, these funding chunks, and then once you get to the end of your chunk, it's this big hair on fire emergency about, what are we going to do next? It happens. This is a particularly acute emergency, but there is an emergency that kind of always coincides with the expiration of that state funding.
Yeah, I'll just share some global experience on that side. And in fact, I was recently in Thailand and we were discussing in Taiwan, they didn't raise fare for last 29 years. I mean, they want to do it 30 years. So for 30 years, there is no fare increase. And still their financial account is growing. And the reason is because the ridership is growing and they're offering more services. So I think fare increase is not a good solution. Like what Ryan mentioned, it's 12%. So even if you increase, it's not going to make huge changes. I think we need to first most of the public transportation around the world. And I think the guest mentioned about they travel internationally and they saw the system robustness, except Hong Kong and I mean Japan and there are a couple of other cities where the public transport system is purely funded through the commercial operation. All around the world, it has to be supported by the state government with some or other form. So the funding has to come, major funding has to come. But there, like I mentioned, there are other ways to create opportunity to raise funding and support the transit system. But again, to reach to that level, again, you need a policy support. So it doesn't come from the authority side or operator side. It needs a lot of policy support at the political level. For example, in Cincinnati, in Ohio, they passed the sales tax bill. So they get a lot of funding through the sales tax now. And they are using that sales tax collection to expand the transit network and fund the transit network. So there are it has to become either monetarily or create a financial environment. Like in Japan and all, they allow TOD, transit oriented development and all. But again, it's a long process. So firstly, the transit need to be functional and workable. You need a continuous support, not a short-term, but a long-term support. And then you can think about these new innovative tools, how to create more sustainable environment.
And I'll chime in just quickly to add to that it's worth remembering that PRT already has some of the highest fares in the country, and that's even before any of these proposed fare increases that would be done in an emergency. So I'll just second everything that Jaspal said. We don't really get much out of it, but we have even currently we have some of the highest fares in the country.
And to tag in on the affordability of public transit being essential for many people in our community, our average, our median income in Pittsburgh is about just a little over $36,000 a year. The annual cost of car ownership is estimated to be about $12,000 a year, so basically $1,000 a month. And just in the past year, I want to say Pittsburgh and Detroit are like the top two cities in the US for the increase in rent costs in our region. If you're, making $36,000 a year, you're having to choose between paying rent or having a car, so that's where public transit comes in to help people get where they need to go.
Yeah, excellent point. Next question we have here is, so this person read an article recently in the Post-Gazette about Pittsburgh being a hub for AI development, but the lack of public transportation is causing many innovators to leave the area. How accurate is that? How will viable public transportation be essential to hosting national events such as the 2026 NFL Draft?
So I'll reiterate the points I made in my answer to that. Starting with the draft is supposed to bring hundreds of thousands of people here. We're a city whose urban population is about 300,000 people as it is. That's a crazy amount of people that will be coming to the region, frankly. And it's a good thing, and we're prepared for it as it stands, but a funding cut right in advance of that would be pretty bad. We'd probably find a way to manage or do our best to find a way to manage, but it would certainly make things much, much harder. And it's already a challenge, a good challenge, but a challenge. Um, let's see, um, the amenities that those AI companies are looking for their employees when they move to a place would include public transit, as well as good schools, as well as good parks, and all these other things that you really want to have, especially if you're a mobile person who works maybe a remote job and can have your pick of all these different cities around the country. If if all else equal, one city has better public transit than another city, even a lot of people who don't use transit every day might consider that a knock against that city and not come. Not to mention everything I mentioned earlier about the air pollution impact. I mean, if all of that shift away from public transit makes the car pollution so much worse, then not only is there not as much transit, but there's way more pollution. And if you've got young kids or something like that, it becomes a real salient factor in your decision making. But as I also said, if anyone knows an innovator who would relocate to Pittsburgh if we only had more transit, boy, should you reach out to me about that, because those are the kind of testimonies that we're looking for.
Great, great. So next question here is from the asker. Their impression from having traveled internationally is that public transport elsewhere is much more robust and used universally. How does American lifestyle, especially the need for convenience, affect the lack of increased use of public transport and electric vehicles as well? How do we promote use of public transit in addition to creating a better system of public transit?
So yeah, I weighed in on this initially. Offering incentives to employers, such as what PRT is doing through the Partner Pass, is a great place to start, because we want to incentivize folks' behavior to want to take public transit. So that could look like increased parking fees downtown, congestion pricing, such as what New York City is doing. Also, improving the service level, so increased frequency can help, as well as ensuring that transit goes to the places that people want to go. But I'll defer to Ryan to maybe talk a little bit more on those points in depth.
Oh, I don't know if I can psychoanalyze the American commuter on that level, but I will say that there are all different kinds of people, and I think that it depends on who you talk to, but some people are looking to use more transit than they currently are. Some people have to use transit because they have no other option. And I think I appreciate the bump for the Partner Pass program. It is a good way for a company to say, let's capture all those people, and let's at least give them the option to ride transit for a discounted price. It really is about, I think, acknowledging that we are in a different starting point than a lot of these cities elsewhere. We're a place that likes choice, a country that likes choice. It's presenting the choice of transit when you can cycle it in, rather than having to being forced to commute by car everywhere you go. But Jess Powell, you probably have more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the important thing we highlight, the public transit should be more attractive option. It's not about you need to think about customer point of view. And it's not that people doesn't like to use public transit. I mean, I can tell you especially the American citizen, when they go to Europe, they love to use public transit and they tell about it. They say like, oh, it was wonderful. I can move around. And that's what I see do. I would say it's a simple test. Whenever you go to any airport in the world, just try to see from airport to your hotel. And what you see in Europe, you will take much more time in a car than in a transit. So, automatically your focus will shift like, oh, I should not use taxi or other way because it's costing me double the time. Whereas in US, that's where we are struggling, is that the time taken is like by car, you can reach in 15 minutes, and by transit, it'll be like 1 hour, 50 minutes. So I think more we use, it's a kind of a ripple effect. The more we can make it attractive, the more people will use it will bring more people. So I think it's not a one-day thing you can solve. I was in Riyadh recently, and Riyadh just launched their new metro line system. They launched a 6 metro line altogether. And a lot of people were questioning, like, who will use metro in Riyadh where the oil is so cheap and people can drive so easily and all. And the metros are full. And when I asked people why they are using metro, they said like the traffic is horrible on the road. So the only option they can do is do. But I think in some city that the congestion hasn't reached to that level where it really forces you. So I think it's not about lifestyle. It's all about making it attractive, telling people and catch them young. I really like what PRT doing with the partner program. Catching them young is also very important. Making them to use of public transit. In some country now, they are trying to bring the college students and the school student into the system. That's where you need to start, but it's not a one-day process. You need to continue to keep investing, and that's why investment is very important. If you really want people to use public transit, you need to make it attractive. You don't need to make it bad, because once it's bad, you lose those rider. But once you make it attractive, you can at least retain and then promote and grow.
Great. We have a question here, and I think Jasper, you've already answered it, but the person asked, out of pure curiosity, what were the Southern European safety outliers on the impact of safety slide?
Yeah, so I mean, we know Italy is one, like the traffic and the use of, I mean, the public transit. Even Spain and Italy both has a good public transportation system, but at the same time, they are facing some issue with the road fatality, and that's why, like in Spain now, they created these super blocks where they are actually making a lot of street car free, and they want to reduce the use of car in certain neighborhood because it's causing problem and the road accident. So these country has now reached to vision zero, and they are progressing. I would say they are progressing well, but yeah, there are certain outlier. That's why I share the paper. Happy to have further chat on that.
Yeah. So this is the last question, which is more of a note. So they thank you all for your great talks. It seems to me that we may not be making a case on the direct economic impacts of transit to everyone, not just transit users enough. For example, salaries are linked to transport costs. Owning a car is much more expensive than relying on transit. So businesses need to charge more to pay driving employees more. Transit can therefore combat inflation and help everyone's cost of living. Also, spending on transit keeps money in the region, operations, construction jobs, versus spending on cars sends tons of money outside the region, cars themselves, gas forever, etc. Can we somehow better make the sort of kitchen table economic argument to those who aren't swayed by the social environmental benefits and unfair costs of transit users? And also, P.S. Ryan, I'm an innovator who narrowly came to Pittsburgh based on there being a sufficient transit network. Happy to attest.
Well, I'll say first of all, this is why organizations like UITP are critically important, because they are the source we would draw from to make that economic case. It is definitely the case that, I mean, even if you're not a transit user, how would you like to see your commute through the tunnels increased by 50%? I wouldn't, and sort of we as environmentalists have had to kind of somewhat be prodded, but also, just sort of trying out different messages, have kind of come to learn that most people do respond best to those practical arguments. So it's not even that we're trying to change our arguments just to make, in a sneaky way. It's just that we come at it from this big, greenhouse gases and climate change perspective, which is all very important, but how do you meet people in the day-to-day? So I will just say that it's an important point, one that we struggle with, but it's very obvious that transit helps a city's economic position, its economic growth for everyone, not just people who ride the transit.
Yeah, and I just share, like I that's what I mentioned, like it's create more economic benefit than what we generally calculate, because we generally assume that, transit is just transporting 150,000 people, that's it. But how much impact they have on the society and economy, especially during COVID, when we saw essential worker, that was the only way they can go to the those places to work and all during the pandemic. So there is clearly an economic case, and like Ryan mentioned, idea is to share both side of perspective, and we need to continue to increase our voice and mention about it, that how it can create. And that's where something I say, like what happened with some of these ride hailing players. And again, in UITP, we promote ride hailing also as part of, as long as it's not a private user vehicle, is involving citizen. And that's why the citizen role is also very important, to ask for and show that it's not only impacting my day-to-day travel, but also economic. The employer cannot get the employees if there is no transit. The schools also face problem. People, if everybody go and drop their kids, so there is a challenge at the traffic. So how we can create more voice, and that's why these forum, and I think this webinar is excellent way to highlight the support. But yeah, I think that's what we are trying to do. But bringing dollar value, it's important, but again, it's very specific to each city, and we can try to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time and answering these questions in a very detailed manner. We'll move on to our last slide here. These are our upcoming events that I think everybody here will be interested in attending. On June 12th, the city of Pittsburgh is engaging in their comprehensive plan, a conversation on the just transition, which very much relates to the topic today. June 17th, the construction budget resource launch will be occurring. And on August 7th will be our next SCDN Policy Connection webinar. And you can find out more about these and other events on sustainablepittsburgh.org/events. So thank you again for joining us, and please contact us if you have any questions. We'll circulate the resources shared today, and hope you'll reach out to us if you have any questions or want to learn more about opportunities to advance sustainability within your municipalities and organizations.